order for beacons to be a scalable solution, you have to manage them from the cloud. So the idea is to use Bluetooth not just in order to broadcast the payload of the iBeacon or the Eddystone format, but also to connect to neighbors and to relay information that's being sent from the cloud to those individual beacons. The fact that beacons are connected to the cloud allow us to do things that are previously impossible with standalone beacons, such as two-way communication with the handset, which is very useful in a situation in which the handset is not connected to the internet.
You're listening to The Hitchhiker's Guide to the Ecosystem with Steve Statler.
Welcome to episode 16 of The Hitchhiker's Guide to the Ecosystem. My name's Steve Statler of Statler Consulting. We're doing this in partnership with Proxbook. And in fact, next week we have the CEO of the company that funds Proxbook who's going to be on. But this week we've got Daniel Drayman, who is the CEO of Peconics. That's one of the companies that he's the CEO of. And the topic that we're going to be discussing is Bluetooth beacons and mesh networks. So in my humble view, Bluetooth beacons are very cool. I think mesh makes them even cooler, even more Internet of Thingsy. And so we'll be learning a bit about that. So Daniel, welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah, I'm excited about what you're doing, and I think we should probably start off with a brief explanation of what Peconics does, and then I'd like to get a bit more background on the other company that you're CEO of. But first of all, what does Peconics do?
So Peconics offers tools to manage beacons remotely. There are multiple ways to look at the company as a technology company and the Bluetooth mesh implementation that we developed. But at the core of it, the idea here is that in order for beacons to be a scalable solution, you have to manage them from the cloud and in an effective way, reduce the total cost of ownership for a practical, large-scale implementation, and that's what Peconics does.
So the core of it is management of beacons using mesh technology, and do you make beacons?
Yeah, so as of today, we sell a complete solution where we offer both the hardware and the software and the services that goes along with such a solution. But we're also working with OEMs, and you will find our software embedded into beacons manufactured and sold by others. So there are two ways to work with us. You can get from us a complete solution, hardware included, and you can work with another beacon manufacturer and just find our technology embedded into it and then use our cloud-based systems with somebody else's beacon. When we sell our beacons, there's no special sauce on the hardware side. So the hardware is the same commodity beacon that everybody else is using, and all the intellectual property is really in the software that makes those beacons, instead of being standalone devices, cloud-connected beacons that can be controlled and interact with the cloud on a constant basis.
And just peel open this mesh concept. What does a mesh of beacons look like?
So it would be impractical to have every beacon connected to the internet with its own Wi-Fi or power or Ethernet connection. So our approach to managing beacons remotely is to have a single element in every venue, which is connected using power or Ethernet physically to a router or to a switch, so to the back end of that particular venue. And this element that we call the controller connects over Bluetooth to beacons that are in relatively close proximity. So let's say up to 20 meters from the controller. But then those beacons in turn can relay information that they receive from the controller to beacons that are further away from the controller, and so on with multiple hops. You can cover a very large venue such as airport, a stadium, a big box retail, a mall, and so forth. So the idea is to use Bluetooth not just in order to broadcast the payload of the iBeacon or the Eddystone format, but also to connect to neighbors and to relay information that's being sent from the cloud to those individual beacons.
So we have beacons that are talking to each other as well as talking to the phones, and over that connection they can do a number of things. They can presumably propagate updates to their configuration, to the firmware, anything else?
Yes, so first and foremost, you can do firmware updates. With a press of a button, you can update your entire fleet of beacons with the latest firmware. Extremely important for security reasons and for advances, to match whatever Google and Apple are going to keep innovating in that field. Then you can individually control every beacon in terms of the content, which is broadcasted by the beacon, whether it's an ID or URL, if we're talking about Eddystone URL beacons. The power level. So oftentimes in retail, merchandising, will change, and suddenly a beacon that was transmitting at a certain power level needs to be configured to transmit at a higher level or at a lower level. And typically, a retailer would send a technician to the store to go and update the configuration for that beacon. We can do it remotely. Now, the fact that the beacons are connected to the cloud allow us to do things that are previously impossible with standalone beacons, such as two-way communication with the handset, which is very useful in a situation in which the handset is not connected to the internet, either because you're at the basement of a department store and you don't have a good signal, or you're a roaming tourist, they just landed in a country in which you don't have a data plan. So we can use beacons for that as well. And that is an entire concept of real-time location services, in which the beacons are not just being picked up by smartphones, but can actually listen to beacons in their vicinity and report back to the cloud what they're seeing. So an example for that would be location of patients and of capital equipment in a hospital, where every patient has a small beacon, a commodity beacon, standard, let's say, iBeacon, attached to their wrist, and every piece of capital equipment will also have a beacon attached to it. And stationary Peconics beacons on the walls would simply locate the movement of those beacons and report it back, so that at every moment in time you'll be able to know where people and equipment is located, which is again a new approach to using beacons for remote for real-time location services.
Yeah, I think this is a fascinating application. Asset tracking, I don't know whether it's a secret or not, but this is really what's been driving the bulk of the sale of beacons. I mean, you only need so many beacons to cover a store, but you start attaching beacons to assets and you can get into the thousands very quickly. So for companies that are in the business of selling a lot of beacons, the companies that have sold 1 million beacons, and there are companies out there, they've done that through tracking assets. And so this is interesting from that perspective. I think it's also fascinating in terms of showing ROI and some real business benefits. And sure, there's real benefits from a marketing perspective in the retail applications, and we'll talk about that. But from a consulting perspective, actually one of my clients is focused on this area. And if you think about what you can achieve in terms of finding things faster, if they're valuable things, you can speed up workflows. There's a lot of business efficiencies. So rather than kind of speculating on product lift, which is challenging, if you can look at efficiencies and see how we can do things faster, lose them less often, then there's a clear ROI there. So I think it's great that you are focusing on that as a use case. Very interesting. Let's just take a step back and tell us how you ended up founding Peconics, and what was the genesis of this idea?
So that's a good question, and sometimes serendipity plays a big role in life. I've been involved in marketing and retail for my entire career, but for the last 6 years, I've been running a company which I also co-founded called Mowingo, which provides platforms that enable retailers to engage their customers. One of our largest customers is a leading quick service restaurant that uses our platform to engage their customers over a mobile app. And when we started using mobile to engage customers, we did a bunch of geofencing, simply using GPS, and that proved very effective, but it had its limitations. For example, in a fast food scenario, you cannot know whether the customer is in the drive-thru or inside the restaurant at the counter. If the restaurant is not, in its own building, but it's in a food court in a mall, you actually cannot know whether the customer is at the restaurant or shopping at the Gap. And then beacons came, and we saw an opportunity to have much more accuracy and to come with use cases that are even more powerful with indoor accuracy of location. But we immediately found that those customers of ours that piloted beacons didn't see the technology as something viable for large-scale deployments because of two issues. One is reach. There's only so many people that have downloaded the retailer's application. And the other one is the cost of management. So the reach is being resolved by the industry. So if you think about Prox, that enables you to reach customers not on your own app, but by having a proximity advertising network in which you can leverage, popular media apps and so forth. And if you think about what Google is doing in terms of nearby and the physical web, where you can use beacons for people that did not previously downloaded your application, I think that this early problem that beacons found, which is a problem of reach, is being solved by the industry, big time, by an order of magnitude. The other problem is the problem of the total cost of ownership. So if you have 500 stores and you install 20 beacons in every store, and now you need to do a firmware update and to send the technicians to those 500 locations and spend a few hours in each one of them to update the beacons, or you just sporadically need to go to update a set of beacons, this becomes unmanageable. So, I have all kind of spreadsheets that show that the initial cost of installing, of purchasing the beacons and installing them pales in comparison to the annual cost of managing them. So I didn't really see a solution for that until, again, serendipity, my next door neighbor, who is a good friend of mine and a wonderful engineer, very, very smart, developed a Bluetooth mesh solution for non-beacon application, for some industrial applications. And while riding our bikes together and comparing notes about, how was your week, how was my week, we came to the conclusion that the technology that he had and the problems I was facing are really a match in heaven. And that's how we decided to create a new company that we focus just on that solution, which is remote management of beacons. Obviously, once we can manage those beacons remotely, other opportunities arise from the fact that those beacons are cloud connected. So beyond just reducing the total cost of ownership, we can do other applications. But at the core of it, the genesis of the company was a match between a technology and a problem that seems to be predestined.
Oh, I think this is fascinating. I think it's a great sign that our industry is starting to mature, that we're going beyond just the very basic essence of proof of concept use cases. And you've done it. You've worked with some really large companies that are deploying beacons, and you've seen the problems, and this new company is looking at solving them. Mesh totally makes sense. And actually, I was referencing my client that's looking at asset management, and they, one of their issues is it's a warehouse. They don't have Wi-Fi there. The connectivity is poor. It's a Faraday cage, and so this is a really interesting application for that. What are the challenges that you have to overcome when you're building a product that implements mesh? It sounds like the perfect solution. I'm sure that there's some problems.
There are a lot of problems, but as an entrepreneur, those problems are opportunities. And so what we have is we filed a large number of patent applications on the way that we resolve those problems. So some of the problems are resilience. So our mesh is self-configuring and self-healing. So when an element of the mesh goes out of order, it doesn't bring the entire mesh down with it. We can route around it. You need resilience for noisy environments. So, in your lab, when the only Bluetooth elements are your own, it's one thing. When you go to real implementations and there are lots of other devices that you have no control over, you want to have protocols that will allow you to basically survive in a hostile environment. And then one of the biggest hurdles to implementing a mesh of beacons is battery life. So when you use beacons that are powered, with AC or USB, that's not an issue. You have as much juice as you want. But in real life scenarios, you don't have this luxury. You're bound to have a large percentage of your beacons to be confined to a battery-powered solution. And a naive implementation of the mesh would make it impossible. So because the mesh is much more demanding than simple beacons that are just broadcasting the payload, the battery life would be puny. So some of the innovations that we have are ways to utilize beacons that are powered by batteries in a mesh environment in a way which is efficient and prolongs the battery life, the autonomy of those beacons.
And what sort of battery life are you seeing at the moment from beacons that are participating in a mesh?
So our goal is to have, before the end of the year, a solution for beacons that will survive on 2 AA batteries for over 2 years while participating in the mesh. And one of the realizations that we had is that, some people are competing on battery life, but unlike firmware updates and other things where you really want a technician, just replacing the batteries in the beacon is something that can be delegated to a shop manager, somebody who's not very technical. This is no different than replacing batteries into a fire detector that you have at home. And therefore, we think that providing beacons that have a 2-year autonomy is something that's commercially viable.
That makes sense. And what stage are you at in the development process? Where is the product maturity?
So we are now in trials with select customers. We're in trials with some very large retailers, with OEMs that are testing our software to embed into their own hardware, and with application vendors, which are for us a channel. Because Peconics is really not providing full-blown solution. We are an infrastructure layer. If you want to do indoor navigation, you're going to buy it from an indoor navigation vendor. If you want to do payment with beacons, you're going to do it with a payment vendor. If you're going to do mobile engagement, you'll choose a company such as Moingo or one of myriad companies in the field. So Peconics see all those companies as channels for Peconics, and we're in trial with those 3 buckets. So retailers, OEMs, solution providers. We are not yet shipping a product at scale. This is something which we will start doing in the beginning of 2017.
All right. And where's the company in stage in terms of people, fundraising, that sort of thing?
So we're based in Silicon Valley, and the core team is a team of 5, mostly engineers. I'm the only guy here who doesn't code all day long. Though I'm an engineer by background, but it's been a while since I've written a piece of code. So we have 5 engineers here, and then we have a team in Ukraine, which supports us with a lot of development, people that we've been working with for a long, long time. So far, we've been self-funded. We are now in the process of raising a major round to really move from trial to production. But that's where the company is.
Very good, exciting time. And where do you see this going? What are some of the things that you want to do in terms of developing the product? I guess you got to launch it. Anything else you want to talk about?
So, I think that one of the hurdles that the industry is facing is around standardization. And I think that even the management of the beacons is something that's going to be standardized. So obviously we want to put forward our technology as the basis for a forthcoming standard on how you manage beacons from the cloud. Mm-hmm. Exactly how we do that, whether it's under the tutelage of some type of SIG, or we open source some of the elements, this is still to be determined. But I think it's very important for any company in that field to play nice with the other ecosystem vendors. This is something big. I think we keep talking about retail because it's one of the obvious applications for beacons, and beacons are by no means limited to retail. But if you think about it, software is eating the retail world. You see Walmart closing stores and Macy's closing stores, and virtually all the department stores announcing that they have losses. And they don't have a level playing field, right? So if you're an e-commerce player, you know everything about your customers, and you are able to tailor offers for those customers. While if you're a brick and mortar retailer, you know nothing. You don't know who are the people that go through your doors. And you need tools both in terms of analytics and in terms of improving the shopping experience, which is another thing that retailers need to do in order to win or to lose less against the e-commerce players. So it's a huge multi-trillion-dollar market that is craving such solutions. I think the beacons are going to be a critical tool for brick and mortar retailers. When they try to stem those losses. And no single company is going to provide all the solutions. It's an ecosystem play. We believe we're going to be an important player in that ecosystem, but we have no illusions that we by ourselves can provide all the answers to all the questions.
Last question, you touched on standards for management, and obviously Google started doing some work in there, filling in the gaps that were left by Apple, so that's kind of interesting. And you've also talked about, you made a reference to Eddystone URL. How does what you're doing fit in with Eddystone URL and any particular implications of using mesh and URL beacons?
Well, I'm glad you brought it up because there's a certain value in being cloud connected in a world in which you don't have an application to translate what the beacon is sending. So if you think about Eddystone URL, one of the issues with it is that if the URL is fixed, you provide business intelligence to your competitors, right? Because they can sniff those URLs and know exactly where your customers are located. And also because you rely on the redirections on the back end, and because Google is caching this information, it's difficult for you to change the information on a dime. So one of the demos that we did is a beacon on a platform that announces directly in your notification area on your Android that your train is arriving in 5 minutes, your train is arriving in 3 minutes, your train is arriving in 1 minute. That's something you cannot do when you don't control what the beacon is actually sending, and you rely on some cached information delivered by proxies. So our ability to drive the content which the beacon is transmitting in real time opens the door to applications centered around Eddystone URL, which are simply not possible when you have a dumb beacon or a standalone commodity beacon. Another thing where we're taking the product is Bluetooth web, or web Bluetooth. I'm not sure exactly how they're going to call it. So today, the beacon just transmits a URL, and you rely on the handset to go and fetch information from the internet. But what if there was a dialogue between the handset and the beacon? Google calls that a fat beacon, but in their mind, it's a beacon that's been pre-programmed with scripts, in order to have this interaction with the smartphone. Because in our case, the beacon is connected to the internet, those scripts don't need to be fixed. It's not that you need to program the beacon, ship them, and forever be confined to whatever you scripted them to do, but you basically can teach those beacons periodically new scripts and allow them to engage with customers on a local basis using this Bluetooth web, in a more intelligent way. So I think it's very, very exciting to move toward those standards, those implementations of interactions between basic browsers and beacons. And 2017 is simply going to be a fascinating year.
Yeah, I think 16 is pretty fascinating, and 17 is going to be even better. Daniel Draymond, Peconics, really interesting company. Love what you're doing. I think Mesh is going to be a key part of the landscape going forward. And congratulations on being one of the first to bring this to market.
Thank you so much, and thank you again for having me.
So are you a very musical person?
I'm not a very musical person. I like music, but it's very diverse. So I'm listening to the same rap songs that my daughter is listening to, and to classical music as well. So it's a little bit of everything.
Fantastic. So if you had to choose 3 songs, which would be the 3 that you took to Mars, and why?
It's a difficult question. 3 is very limiting. So, but if I have to go with 3, so one would be definitely a song from one of my favorite troubadours that I have to select between, Jacques Brel or Leonard Cohen. And I don't know exactly which song, from either I would take. Then the second one would probably be the Adagio, which is attributed to Albinoni, but was actually composed by somebody else.
All right.
Because I think it's a very suiting thing, and if you're going on a very long voyage to Mars, you want something,
Yep.
you can come to. And the third one would probably be Sultan of Swings by Dire Straits, because this is the most humbling song, I believe. When you hear Mark Knopfler, playing the guitar, I once realized that no matter what I will undertake, there's no field in which I will be as good as he is with the guitar. So that's when I kind of got humbled by that. But that's a song that's following me. Yeah.
Well, I think you're the first of our guests to choose classical, and it's a very eclectic mix. I like it.